Good morning. This informational meeting of the Montana Public Service Commission is called to order. I am Commission President Jeff Wellborn, and with me are Commissioners Molnar, Panochi, Bukasek, and excused is Commissioner Fielder. For the record, the time is 10:03, and today is March 24th of 2026, and we are conducting this informational meeting from the Bollinger Room here at the Montana Public Service Commission. The purposes of this meeting is to hear an update on NorthWestern Energy's wildfire mitigation plan, which is the subject of Commission Docket 2025.08.059. NorthWestern filed its mitigation plan with the Commission on August 11th of 2025 in compliance with House Bill 490, which has now been codified MCA 69-2-301 through 303. The Commission approved NorthWestern's plan on November 21st of 2025. We are here today to listen to NorthWestern's update. The Commission will not be receiving any public comment. Mr. Merkel, welcome.
Good morning, President Wellborn, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing the time for us to update you on the wildfire mitigation plan. I think my colleague is working on getting a presentation up for you. If you can bear with us for just a moment. I think he's about there, so I'm going to get started. I believe you have copies in front of you today, Commissioners. Well, today the agenda that we would like to cover today is the annual filing update. That annual filing update is new to us. This would be our first update, if you will. And it's to statute MCA 69-2-302. So we'll be going through that annual filing. We also want to talk a little bit about the Commission's recommendation when we filed the wildfire mitigation plan. You had some recommendations for us for improvement on performance metrics. And I'll just talk briefly to the progress and where we're going with that today. And then as well as going into a little bit of the detail of the wildfire mitigation plan. What we accomplished in 2025, we're going to summarize, but you will be receiving a detailed filing on, as well as talk a little bit about what we plan to achieve in 2026 and give you a little bit of a preview of that as well. With that, Charlie?
President, let's see if I got this close enough. Can you hear me okay? Is that coming through? Okay. President Wellborn, Commissioners, it's good to see you this morning. Charlie Lane, I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs for NorthWestern Energy. Give a little bit of regulatory context around why we're here this morning. This is not a required filing or required presentation under either the House Bill 490 requirements or under our wildfire plan. But really, this is an opportunity for us to come in, like we said we would in our last rate case, that we'd come in twice a year and give an update on where we were, once in the spring and once in the fall, and give a little context around that. And this is the first opportunity that we're having to give this presentation. So we look forward to providing that information to you guys. So we got two filings here coming up. We've got a wildfire mitigation balancing account, which was coming out of our last rate review, and we'll be filing that by April 1st. So that will be specific to the expenses that were designated for recovery within the wildfire balancing account. We don't have those details of that filing here today, but just wanted to give you that update that we will be making that filing shortly. The other is the compliance filing or I guess I should say it's an annual report filing that's required under the House Bill 490 of an update each year of our work done under that wildfire plan. So that filing is due June 1st, and we'll be making that filing. So this is really just an opportunity to kind of give you guys a little bit of a preview of what those will be and a little bit of what work that we have done and some explainers on some of the details of that work. With that, I'll hand it back over.
So I'll open first. Excuse me. I'll open first to talk a little bit about the commission recommendations and through the wildfire mitigation approval process. It's probably worthwhile talking a little bit about our wildfire mitigation plan and where it's been on its journey. Our initial plan we introduced to the commission in 2022, and really that was to introduce, if you will, the need and this emerging issue of wildfire within the utility space. So that first version really was to talk about all the things that the company needed to do in addition to what we've always done in the vein of wildfire mitigation, the enhancement components, if you will. And then the journey, once we had the commission on board with the needs of what the company felt we needed to do to mitigate wildfire, we also had a lot of external interest in the wildfire mitigation plan. Credit agencies, for example, they were very concerned and wanting to know what we were doing to mitigate wildfire. That was in the aftermath of so many tragic events that occurred with other utilities, and really began to engage them, as well as those that insure utility companies. They had an interest. So we had a version or two that met their needs as well as the commission's. Then it became incredibly apparent to us that first and foremost, we need to engage the consumers and the customers and the agencies of Montana to this growing issue. As we move forward, totally understand and respect the commission's desire to have more performance metrics, to understand the effectiveness and the efficiency of the mitigations that the company is using. And certainly that's where our eyes are focused for the next version, if you will, of the wildfire mitigation plan. However, I can tell you we won't wait for the plan. We have the same interest. We have shared interests with the commission to be able to understand and measure our own effectiveness and how we're doing with wildfire, both from a performance perspective and a cost perspective. So we're aligned on those recommendations and requests. And without the commission's recommendation, I could see that we were heading in that direction. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You requested quantitative performance metrics and asked that they be included in the next wildfire plan. How many gadgets and how many corrections and repairs and poles and those type of quantitative performance metrics, and we will certainly include those. The quantitative or qualitative benefit metrics, and I see we have an error there, in terms of risk-spend efficiency, benefit cost ratio or analysis. Often that's referred to as BCA. We will talk more in this presentation on the development of those. We believe that we're well on our journey from a risk spend efficiency, and we'll ultimately get to a point where we use benefit cost analysis when appropriate. And then last but not least, to be able to assess and continue to assess mitigation alternatives, things that are being developed or may not be here today, and how do we keep an eye for that opportunity for constant improvement. I will say that all of these things are built on a foundation of data. To do any of those metrics and analysis, you need good data. And there are several programs that we've initiated since the onset of wildfire mitigation to position us to be able to do these things once we've obtained the data. So we do have many programs that are programs really dedicated to data and being able to both obtain that data, manage it, and put it into an analysis form. That brings me to the next slide. What we've learned about through the experiences of others, there's also the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory has done some work on this as well to understand what is the evolution of a wildfire mitigation plan. What do you expect? And what we've learned from that is, if you look at this next slide, at the bottom, you'll see when you have that initial wildfire mitigation plan all the way up to a 5-year plus, what you would expect to see through the evolution of how you're able to manage the plan. And initially, as you do with most program startups, you go to your best and brightest, you go to your subject matter experts, and you start with, well, what do you think? And that's where we got our start as well. And then you move to qualitative metrics. You're looking at metrics that allow you to guide your programs to obtaining the most risk reduction that you possibly can per dollar. Risk modeling, where you look at the circuits and you look at your whole system as a whole, and you begin to rank and prioritize it in terms of not all segments are created equal. And what you're really looking to guide your programs to is let's get to the worst, versus a cost ineffective approach of just wholesale fixing the whole system. How do you provide yourself to be in a position to be predictive and methodical with your risk reduction? You can't get there without the risk modeling. And then looking at key performance indicators, and eventually risk spend efficiency. And finally, being able to apply, when you're looking at one alternative against others, an actual formulaic approach to benefit cost analysis in selecting which alternative is the most cost effective. I can tell you with our company, we're well underway all the way up to risk spend efficiency. And we do some level of informal benefit cost ratio, even where we exist today. And as a reminder, we're entering into about 3.5 years. We introduced the wildfire mitigation in 2022, but we really didn't get our start until the first budget year of 2023. The next slide is again a depiction of where we believe our maturity is, and specifically relative to other utilities. The the internal graph or bar would show the typical maturity at year 2. And then the red would indicate where we're at NorthWestern Energy in terms of our maturity of the plan. And you can see the various elements that define that maturity. Benefit cost ratio, it's a good example. It's at a 1. We are applying that in an informal basis. Conversely, our risk modeling and our use of subject matter experts is on track with what probably most utilities are doing. But our risk model, in contrast, we have a number of utilities, and I'm proud to say they seek our team to help guide in their risk modeling development in the many associations and utility partnership opportunities that we have. This is a self-assessment, but I can tell you it is guided by both the PNNL report, Pacific Northwest National Laboratories, would support what I believe is a fair assessment of where we're at. And in addition to that, I would say it's consistent with the technical master assessment that the commission hired to review our wildfire mitigation plan. Lastly, where I'll leave you, pass this over to Nate, is to talk about, this is a good summary of how we view where we're at, what we're trying to accomplish from that KPI analytical approach to be able to most cost effectively reduce risk for our systems, for our company, and all of our stakeholders, most specifically our customers. First, understanding risk. The pictures you see here, I know as a commission you've seen before. Again, I'm proud to say I think we lead most utilities in terms of the creative ways that we've engaged and employed the data that we already had in order to understand the risk, define what is the risk, and also prioritize the risk. We have some 25,000 miles of electric. 7,000 of that is already underground, leaving 18,000 miles of electric lines. These models help us understand that not all line segments are created equal. Not all line segments have the same level of risk, and it allows us to prioritize and to focus on where is the highest risk and how can we mitigate the most efficiently and effectively. The tools that we use, and we've developed just a plethora of tools. Probably the most substantial is in the area of situational awareness. The last time I was at the commission, immediately following a meeting that we had, I remember Commissioner Molnar, you and I talked about the wind had just been blowing. And what we have to understand, and what these tools help us understand, is it's not just the fact that the wind is blowing. We can't be singular focused on one potential threat. We have to understand that threat in the mix of fuel moistures, the ability for fire, if it does ignite, how quickly will it spread? In addition to that, how will our systems perform with that event? All of those are in a myriad of a dynamic model that changes by hour and it changes by day. And I'm proud to say that through weather modeling, through understanding our data and our systems, And bringing all of those different elements together, we feel much more comfortable today understanding for the forecasted weather event what should be our course of action. Last but not least is the performance metrics. And certainly we owe this to our customers to be able to understand that we are using the most cost-effective approach to reducing risk while maintaining affordability. The other thing that I'll say has been a real paradigm change for many, first in the industry. I can start with myself. I started in this company well over 30 years ago, 33 and some change to be exact. And when I started with this company, it has always been about reliability and reliability only. When the power goes off, it's what are we going to do? And it was our obligation, it was our mission to always get that power on as quickly as we possibly could, without question. This threat has really changed that paradigm because now we have two bookends at the opposite end of the spectrum. We have the same mission that we've always had around reliability. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have the responsibility to mitigate risk and determine when is it so, when the threat is so great that it's just not reasonable or feasible to operate an electric system. That's a PSPS. And everything in between. There are times, and what these tools have allowed us to do is to understand which end of the bookend should we be the closest to in any given time or hour. It's been quite an accomplishment to be able to position ourselves to do what's right for customers, keep the power on for customers, and at the same time, mitigate the threat of wildfire. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Wildfire Operations, and he's going to go through what we actually accomplished in 2025 from an activity perspective. How many gizmos and gadgets did we actually complete? And then he'll also talk a little bit about our eye on 2026.
Thank you, Jason. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Nate Linder. I'm the Director of Wildfire Operations for NorthWestern Energy. I've been here once or twice, but wanted to reintroduce myself just in case.
Welcome back.
Thank you. This first slide, I just wanted to maybe refresh kind of our wildfire mitigation plan in general, talk briefly about the 4 objectives in the plan, and then how we've structured the layout of the components within the plan to meet those objectives. So at the highest level, our plan is focused on 4 main things: reduction in ignition potential. We want to have an increased system and environmental monitoring and enhanced vegetation management activities, and an enriched communication and public outreach. So from that standpoint, all of our activities that we then proceed with, we want to make sure we're hitting one of those markers. And if you look on this slide, you'll see along the left-hand side of the 5 categories that we've broken our plan down into. And there's a lot of interplay between those actual categories and those objectives. And one thing that we like to talk about is when we're executing our wildfire mitigation plan, there is various layers of protection that we do. So there is some overlap, but that's to make sure that we're addressing the risk and getting extra eyes and work at those risk points. Also, a big component of this is the situational awareness. It's really difficult to understand your risk if you're not situational aware, and that drives right into our operational practices, and we'll speak more to that in future slides. And then the last thing is system preparedness. Those are all those, I'll say, long-term risk reduction activities, and that really hardens our grid against, I'd say, those extreme weather events. So this First slide, it actually is an infographic, and I thought this would be one way that we could connect, in an illustrative way, the work that we're completing out in the field, and actually provide some numbers on some activities that we executed in 2025. So I'll work through these fairly quickly. The first three I'll say are primarily I'll be in that system preparedness category. These really are the long-term risk mitigation activities that we're executing on. The very first one, the pole replacement and reframing. It doesn't take too much thought to get around. If we can just build a stronger system, then that'll be hardened against any extreme weather events. And we certainly are doing that in areas where we have higher risk areas. So in 2025, a total of just over 2,000 poles were replaced in those higher risk areas, and that's between our T&D system. Moving on to item number 2, again, a system preparedness item. This is actually undergrounding. This is primarily applicable on the distribution system. And this, again, allows us to reduce that overall risk of our infrastructure in those high-risk areas by burying that, and really starts to minimize what the impacts of weather could be on that system. And then number 3, I just generally group this as grid hardening. Again, another system preparedness. You can think of all the various, Jason called them gizmos, but gadgets and, hardware, cross arms, new conductor, maybe even some reframing that wasn't associated with a pole change out. There's a lot of activities that we can go out and harden the system without doing a complete, new pole. So we did about 300 miles total of equipment replacement and some specific reconductoring around 19 miles of our right-of-way. Item number 4 starts to give a little indication on some of the situational awareness tools that we've implemented. This in particular is highlighting the various weather stations, and we've installed those. We call them our weather monitoring zones that we are specifically want to have very accurate information on what's the weather doing in this area of high risk for us. So we installed 20 stations in last year. And then the smoke detection cameras, those are an early indicator of any kind of wildfire on the landscape. That is one of the components that really can get at the consequence side of the risk equation. Risk is probability times consequence. If we can identify and get resources on a fire in a timely manner, it's much less likely to become an all-season event. Number 5 gets into risk tree removal. Risk tree is a tree that might be dead, dying, diseased, maybe structurally defective, has some kind of component to it that would cause us concern. So we will send a certified utility arborist down the right-of-way, giving a ground inspection of this vegetation and identifying any veg that could possibly fall into our line. And so last year, it kind of includes 2 components. One, there's the assessment of the actual ground patrol, and then anything they find, they actually mitigate. Number 6 gets into just the proactive vegetation management. So this would be your vegetation that may not be at risk from dead, dying, disease, but more just the proactive nature of vegetation continues to grow in our right-of-ways, and we have to be out and be aggressive in that's removal. So lots of great work in this regard last year, nearly 2,000 miles. It also, this one item, I included the hotspot locations. So as we go out and perform these inspections on the system, our assessors will identify locations that may not need a complete proactive trim, but a tree at a time. So there was nearly 1,200 or just over 1,200 hotspot locations as well. Number 7 is advanced technology. We continue to bring our system along from a technology standpoint. We are using, a really fast trip reclosing methodology. So as our wildfire risk increases, we want the system to respond more rapidly to any kind of fault condition. And we can do that through the addition of any line reclosures. So Put some stats in here. In 2025, on the distribution system, we applied a kind of protective state on over 271 times. And I say over 271 times because there's many days in which the same indication is going to travel from all week, right? So we want to apply that tag, and we're going to be in that protective state for the whole week. We also are procuring additional devices for this year. We're going to continue to deploy devices to make us operationally ready at the risk level. Number 8 is public safety power shutoffs, better known or as known as PSPS. And again, this is that measurement or the last resort tool that we could use if we're really faced with one of those extreme weather events. And we went through our EPSS settings, and we're kind of at the last option is to actually do a shutoff. Happy to say in 2025, as you may remember, wasn't the hottest, driest, probably wildfire season we've ever had, in which we didn't actually hit an event that required us to do a shutoff. Number 9 is all the inspection and repairs. Again, this is kind of in the system preparedness category lane. We did just a tremendous amount of work of going out and getting eyes on our system, both from the ground and in the air, using both helicopter patrols as well as drone inspections. And from that assessments, we identified over or nearly 7,000 repair opportunities and performed 6,600 or so repairs on the system across T&D. And number 10 is related to community support. I'm really happy of our progress here. I think we've had some great conversations with not just your typical fire agencies of the DNRC or BLM, but also the smaller rural fire departments, those fire chiefs. They're really interested in what we're doing. We're happy to partner with them and have them understand how we're looking at fire risk and understand their risk areas. It's been excellent work. We've done a number of presentations around the state. We continue to get requested to join events that we typically, I think, had not really thought of that they talk about fire in the past. So it's been a great inclusion to do that. Lots and lots of customer outreach points through email, web, direct mail. And then we've also have staged a generator that we can use across our 6 major divisions in case we need to have some backup generation. Oops. Okay, now I thought, that was fairly high level. I'm going to go through each category quickly and maybe touch on some of these things were already represented in the last slide, both on what we did in 2025, and then also gives a little bit of the kind of where we're going in 2026 focus. This very first one, situational awareness, we're going to continue to deploy weather stations and smoke detection cameras. I think the big takeaway from this slide, and Jason touched on it briefly during his intro, are kind of those systems that enable us to do other work. And a big part of 2025 was establishing our GIS, our Esri-based kind of enterprise system, which does daily computational analysis of the wildfire risk. And that's what provides that operational decision making. So that was a huge lift. I'm really excited that we have that in place now. And that is a 24/7, every day doing analysis across 2,000 of our weather monitoring zones and providing that operational guidance. Operational practices. The first one, I didn't really mention enhanced power safety settings, EPSS. Those are the quick reaction of our system to any fault condition so that it can de-energize before possible ignition. During that time, if we have a system that's in that setting and we do have a fault, we have to send a crew out or a resource out to patrol the entire circuit to understand what was it that happened. We don't want to close back into a faulted condition. So we had a number of hours of crews out performing that work. And we're going to continue to do that through our elevated system in 2026. Another great one, outage reviews. The system does give us a lot of information back. A lot of You may have heard of a momentary outage. Those are things that are not a sustained outage. That's the system telling you there could be something, touching the wire, maybe a tree branch, maybe there's a failed insulator that's coming, and you'll get some signals back to us that say there's something maybe happening. We did a little over 1,100 of those kind of momentary outage investigations in 2025. SCADA controls, the very last one, is a great one to talk about. Gets into the advanced technology. Our distribution operations control center has really moved itself forward, and they are ready to start controlling more of our distribution line equipment from the control center. So that will relieve some pressure on our field resources to go out and manually operate that equipment. System preparedness. Really, the great thing about this one is really the boots on the ground doing a lot of work. And I think we represented a lot of this on the infographic slide. I will just reiterate the very last item, I think, in general, was the additional devices that we procured, long lead time items throughout 2025. And again, that'll provide us a more surgical way in which we can operate our distribution and transmission systems kind of where the risk level is. So excited to get those devices in-house and get them installed. Vegetation management. This is one that everybody likes to grab onto. I think vegetation management can be understood at a pretty basic level. Obviously, trees and as an ignition source is not something we want too near our line, but across the utility landscape, I would say vegetation outages usually rank as one of the higher causes of an outage fault condition. So this is one that just needs increased focus, that we want to make sure that we have proper clearance around all of our lines, and not only that, make sure that we're identifying any risks outside of our right-of-way that we can help mitigate before it falls into the right-of-way. And then lastly, all this work that we're doing, all the impacts we potentially could have on our customers, we know that there's this balance between, this risk and reliability. And, we do have some areas of our system that is going to have a little bit more of an impact due to where they live and our need to operate the system a little differently. But we've had really good feedback that those customers that are in those areas of higher wildfire risk understand the need and are patient as we work through, whether we have an outage or any work on their system or in their area. So that's been really encouraging that they also are kind of tied into the wildfire risk and they are supportive in what we're doing. But we continue to do those outreach engagements, particularly with some of the state agencies, and it's been going really well. We do have our Wildfire Summit coming up again in May. I know Commissioner Molnar, you were able to attend last year. We'd love to have you there if you guys also want to have a conversation around wildfire. Just highlight a couple key priorities for us coming into the 2026 year. Kind of picked out a few things with each of the categories. So from a situational awareness standpoint, we are currently rerunning our consequence analysis, and we've got a new data set that we're excited about that gets into the watershed. So we feel like we can fold that factor into our consequence analysis. Obviously, if you impact a watershed, there's huge downstream effects of that. So that is an area that we are updating right now. We also are looking at as I'm learning, there's many different ways to understand what the wildfire risk is, and there's a number of different indices. We believe we have one of the top ones with the Severe Fire Danger Index, but there are others that we're working with the Forest Service to understand how can we pull those into our short-term modeling. And then we spoke briefly about the expanded smoke detection and weather monitoring systems that we're deploying. On the operational practices side, we have updated our enhanced power line safety settings template. So every one of our line devices in the field is following the same standard. That was a huge undertaking by our engineering department, and excited to see that be developed. And we're getting that deployed this year right now. We talked a little bit about the control of the system. Our distribution operations control center we'll soon, I think by June 1st, we'll have SCADA control of over 950 field devices. And we've updated on the public safety power shutoff. It can be challenging to track every single customer from beginning to end, but we just implemented a new system in which we know for sure which premise is in which phase of the public safety power shutoff. That's a phased approach in which premises could go different ways based on their risk level, and really happy to report that we've done some testing on that, and it seems to be working great. System preparedness, I've touched on the first two bullets a couple times. The one area that we're pushing into is we saw some real benefits of the drone usage on the distribution system. So we're expanding that to the transmission system in 2026. We have a number of line segments that we're excited to get really up and really high resolution photos of some components on our transmission system. Vegetation management, I think the number one thing there is we did a pilot program with a LiDAR-based technology, specifically looking at vegetation management. We're going to expand that and use it primarily on our transmission right-of-ways. Continues to help identify those vegetation risks that could fall in using a technology. And on the last one, customer communication and public outreach, one item that we continue to be requested is from our partner agencies for a specific agency-focused tabletop on a PSPS. So we have that scheduled in conjunction with our summit in May, and looking forward to that feedback from those groups. We continue to expand our communication channels and how we can educate any of our customers in our service area. And then lastly, we've had some conversations around a possible battery rebate program. And these would be for our at-risk customers or businesses, or I would say businesses in at-risk areas. Is there a way to provide them a temporary backup solution if we do need to do a PSPS? So a couple of closing remarks, and then maybe I'll pass it back over to Jason for anything he wants to finish with. But I'll just say the work that we completed in 2025 was in line with our WMP document, and we're really excited about the tremendous effort that we were able to achieve. I'll also just say, we continue to implement these strategies, which are, data-driven, risk-informed methods to getting at the highest risk areas. So I think we had a great 2025 and really set us up well coming into 2026.
Commissioners, just a couple other comments. One of the I want to point out the cameras, and although that is very self-serving for us, with the goal of if we can get resources, fire agencies to an ignition in the early hours after an ignition, the likelihood of controlling that blaze goes up exponentially. And what we found with much of our deployment last year was that served our communities very, very well. And I don't know that we had, and I probably should know this, but I don't know that we had actually a electric system ignited fire that was captured in those cameras. But we certainly caught a whole lot of fires associated with those cameras. We're going to continue the deployment. We do have statistics of coverage of our broad system. How much we're covering today, I think we're approaching covering all of our, if you remember, we've established the state, our systems, into 3 risk tiers: high, medium, and low. And we've covered the majority of our high risk areas in the first wave. We are focused on getting to those medium risk areas with camera deployment. We fully expect and that we're going to continue to serve those agencies. They're I believe they're depending on the technology that we put out there. I think it's not only saving our customers money, but it's also saving agencies and taxpayers money with what we've done with that program. That one has been a real highlight. The other thing that we've spent a lot of energy within our company, and it's both to meet the recommendations of the commission, but also just to allow us to be a more effective operator, bringing technology to our system. Nate touched on it, but I wanted to emphasize it. Today, we have much of our system that we have manual reclosures. We have to deploy somebody a long drive once the decision's been made that the upcoming forecast should move that from a reliability-based operation to a risk-based operation. And we need to change the settings of that manual device. The way it sits today, we do have to deploy somebody often to go to those. I think of the, and don't quote me on these numbers, it's subject to check, but roughly we have about 1,200 line reclosures on our system. To date, about 450 of them are electronic. And the electronic, the benefit of the electronic is we can wait until that event is near before we change from reliability to risk base. And when the weather threat has passed, we can change back quickly. What that allows us to do is to optimize our operation, to be reliability focused as often as we can and still acknowledge risk base. We've done a lot of work there. We've enhanced our settings. We used to be either it's kind of an on or an off. Now we can stage the settings to the sensitivity of the environment. So we have multiple settings. If it's not really a wildfire threat, but there's some level of wildfire threat, we adjust our settings to match that threat. A lot of good work in 2025, 2026. We'll continue with many of the programs. As Nate pointed out, we're going to constantly be evolving and adjusting. We are going to focus on programs that enable us to be better. Sometimes those can be a struggle because they do cost money to employ, but you need them in order to be able to optimize and be more effective and more cost efficient in our approach. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions or comments, we would entertain all the above. I will remind you, none of us are equipped to go through the detail of the balancing account filing. We should probably save that discussion for another day. But certainly anything from a general topic or approach, we're here for your pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Merkel, and thanks all of you guys. And I'm sure there are questions from the commissioners. It seems like there's probably enough here that if we focus on the presentation today, we've probably take us deep into the meeting. So I see Commissioner Molnar has his light on. We'll go with him first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would be for Mr. Merkel or Mr. Linder, whoever would want to take it. Mr. Merkel, you mentioned you want to be able to get a paradigm, an idea as to how you're doing with the program. One of the questions I asked it during the rate case, I've asked it since, is it was stated that you've done a 50-year look back on sources of ignition. I asked how many of those came from the distribution, transmission, sub-distribution, from Northwestern's chunk of it, including distribution out of BPA, and how many came out of BPA transmission. And I was been told we didn't keep track of that while we were looking at sources of ignition. I would like to have that for the purpose of a look back. Any 1 year compared to another year is meaningless, but over 50 years, it gives us an idea, I think, as to quote how we're doing. Obviously, there's been technology changes and upgrades, and there's been a lot of changes, but I think it would be valuable information. So if I could get that at some point, I'd appreciate it, perhaps in your up and coming filing. And the other one, and this goes to what you said we discussed. You guys are talking about 2025. You and I discussed 2026. The whole idea behind the public safety power shutoff was heavily wind. And you were talking 60-mile-an-hour winds, taking a look at it. We had 100-mile-an-hour winds. And I checked your website. There was no general notice that we might have 100-mile-an-hour winds starting in 2 days, 1 day, 8 hours from now. So we may have to shut off. There was no coordination, near as I can tell. There was no information given. And I think there should be. You know, you're supposed to have a system to do that. You don't have to shut it off to warn people that we may have to, so charge your batteries for your pacemaker or whatever you got to do. I would like to have that addressed at some point as to whether or not that was a good enough response, or if perhaps it could be a better way to do it. And secondly, from our discussion, without going through all of it, because I'm sure others have questions as well, but 100-mile-an-hour winds. The answer was, we took a look at it and there was snow in the areas we were concerned with, so we weren't concerned about a fire. 100-mile-an-hour winds, you're not going to have any snow in the trees. One spark into a tree and you have a crown out, moving 100 miles an hour, will cross any county in Montana in 2 hours. You can't put a fire crew in front of it and you can't firebomb it. You have to prevent it if possible. Plainly, if the wind coming over the mountain comes out of the valley in a different direction, you have a paradigm change. I'm just amazed that you would rely on paradigms and charts and hope that the snowpack would stop it, as opposed to be prepared for. A distribution line went down for a co-op, and you have to have the power shut off to be prepared. I'm not seeing it in what we discussed. The rural magazine from the co-ops, the entire edition was on the damage done to distribution lines, etc., from the same 100-mile-an-hour winds. Your lines were at risk, the same as theirs were. So if we're going to put a lot of money in discussion on public safety and public shutoff, I would like to have a discussion on what we did in 100-mile-an-hour winds in 2026 and what could be done better, or was it good enough? Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions. The first one I'm going to have to address right off the bat. You asked about fire ignitions, and I too wish I could perform 50 years of analysis using that data to be able to show our improvement, or to be able to gauge our improvement from an ignition standpoint. Fact of the matter is, the data doesn't exist. I don't think 50 years ago, I told you through most of my career, we were reliability based. We didn't measure that. We didn't extract that data. It just doesn't exist. I will caution the commission, same as I caution executives, other executives, and people within this company, that fire ignition as a gauge of your effectiveness with wildfire mitigation can be a slippery slope. because it is mostly dependent on the fire conditions. So you could be patting yourself on the back for what have you really done other than Mother Nature really helped you out that year. So wildfire ignitions it's definitely a KPI. It's definitely a measure we should look at and understand. So I support your desire to look at that. But we need to be really careful that we use that as the gauge for success in what we're trying to do to accomplish wildfire mitigation from an electric system mitigation perspective. I wish we had the data. I don't have the data. We don't have the data. The utility industry doesn't have the data. So I can't provide for that request, and my apologies.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, it was stated that you had done that sworn testimony. So however far back you can go, how many times was the fire started by transmission, BPA, years, I don't care, distribution, because you have distribution off of BPA, distribution and sub-distribution, as far back as you can get the information, because it goes not just to what we're talking about. If you are doing a really good job, and frankly, I think you guys do on this issue, you don't hear of fires being started by your system. If you're doing a really good job, how many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars should we put into doing a better job that doesn't get better results? You're doing a great job. If the answer is almost none, be proud of it. If you're going to put more money into it, why and where become logical points of discussion, hopefully not for argument, but just for how do we do this better, and take a look at the money that's being spent. Perhaps it has to be spent in upgrades of newer technology. Maybe it has to be done exactly the way you're doing it. I don't know. But if we don't know how many fires are started by electrical system, we're never ever going to get a handle on where does the money need to go and how much effect are we going to get out of this? How much insurance reduction should you be able to expect? There's a lot of questions involved in this that the answer begins with how many fires have started from electrical distribution in infrastructure. So however far back you can go and get that, I'd appreciate it. And that's all I can say is we received testimony that the study was done. I can do a word search and find out how many years back they went. To me, it was an amazing number, like 50 years. If they did it, they had data. I'm sure there were gaps in the data, new requests for data that wasn't gathered back then, but how many were started? Starting with, we don't know from 1960 back. Here's what we got is all I'm looking for.
I may need to understand that testimony, to understand the context of it. We may have that for the CTS if that was the. Okay, we'll.
It was a lady that gave it. I don't remember her name.
Okay, that helps too. It's probably Brandy. We'll find out. But thank you. To your other question, no coordination. You heard us say we haven't had a situation yet where we have alerted the public, where we've alerted the public. We've gone into our formal phases of PSPS. On our website, we've historically always announced to our customers, high winds, expect outages. But that's outages related to reliability. That's outages related to the damages that we expect. Different than we're announcing that we're going to do a proactive power shutdown because of a fire hazard. We had the high wind event of December 17th. We had some just in the last couple of weeks. Actually, I think December 17th, it was a little easier answer for us. When we looked at, I'm going to stop and make one more point before I talk about December 17th. By no means do I want the commission to take away that we don't expect to start a fire. We're an electrical system. Electrical systems are going to arc and spark. I think as a utility company, if you believe you're going to eliminate all fires all the time, you are not going to meet the reliability expectations of our customers, not even close. The power would be off a lot of the time. It's that balance. And the fire I don't want to cause is the fire that's going to cause rapid spread and have substantial destruction to property and potentially fatalities. That's what our wildfire plan is seeking to mitigate. We know we're going to start fires. We started some fires last year. And what constitutes a fire? Is it when our structure starts to burn? Because we have that. They're called pole fires. They usually occur right after every rain is when we get pole fires. The wood is really dry. We have a failed insulator. We don't know we have a failed insulator. We get a heavy rain. And now that insulative property of that wood, it turns to a conductor and it begins to burn the wood. The structure starts on fire. Does that constitute a fire? How about when those embers or that spark falls to the ground and it starts a fire that's about 3 feet in diameter and it goes out on its own because whatever conditions exist at the time, it just can't promote fire spread. So when we look at understanding and categorizing, and we're looking at this, by the way, we're trying to categorize this whole issue because we want to be able to measure them. But just to say, how many fires did you start? That has a wide meaning right off the bat. To me, it's anything that ignited a burn, period. Doesn't matter how consequential. Because that's potentially a part, a component, a piece or part that could have went bad. And at the worst of environmental times, could cause rapid fire spread. In December 17th, as we analyzed the conditions existed, we knew we were going to have destruction to our system. Predicted 100-mile-an-hour winds plus, we knew we were going to have destruction. We expected it. We prepared for it. We staged crews for it so we could respond. And what was so incredible about that event is it covered every one of our operating divisions. Normally, a wind event will hit one or two, and we rely on the rest of the state to be able to respond. That particular event, everybody had to stay home because they were going to be busy in their own division. We used our contractors, we deployed our contractors, we staged them so that we could respond quickly. But through that entire event, we were not necessarily concerned about wildfire. We knew we were going to have reliability events. Our data told us we were not going to have wildfire issues or events that would be conducive to a PSPS. In the last few weeks, we've had substantial wind. We have had wildfire condition situations that would promote fire spread. We didn't believe there was enough of an event from condition that we couldn't control it with EPSS. The way it worked out, we didn't have a fire that created substantial property damage. Certainly not a fatality during those events. we stuck on that scale. We managed more towards the reliability side of the scale than we did to the risk-based side, because we had the tools to understand that that was appropriate. That's the only way I can answer your question. Is we haven't announced to anybody since we established a formal PSPS that we were into PSPS. We've had 0 events. I know we're going to have one. I know they're coming. And what we've educated our customers about is there's bad weather coming. We can't control the outages that are going to recur. Expect them, be ready for them.
Thank you for that. With this caveat, I don't think that parsing the difference between a power outage because a pole blew down, so you need to be aware that might happen, and there may be a power outage because we may have to do a PSPS, so charge up your engine. It's the same warning. There may be power outages. You don't have to go into depth on a text. I've gone to your website. The average person is not going to go there. And if they do, they're not going to be able to find it. You need to be able to, do a massive text, same as a politician would across the state. Possible power outages in the following area due to high winds. And you've got it covered. Take care of medical devices, charge up, get extra water, whatever you want to do. Is a friendly warning that things may happen, whether it's your decision or a weather caused disruption, pole went down. I would like to be able to see that. I think that the response teams, be they the sheriff, Forest Service personnel going in and telling people that might not have it, I think it's great practice because it might happen and it will happen. So it's great practice. That's all I'm saying.
I appreciate those comments.
Yeah. And I think that's really good feedback, and I appreciate that. And I know that we're continuing to find the right mix of messaging. I'll just share that I think we have better penetration on our messaging in some of the social media apps. That I think that's where a lot of our communication team focuses their efforts, is maybe too much on the Facebooks and those platforms. And we probably could circle back and also make sure our website is staying up to date on that same messaging. But I do know, because I do get the notifications when they come through, when we're going to have those type of weather events that are going to impact our reliability, that they're very active in those social platforms on trying to connect with our customers. But point taken on the website. Thank you.
One of the issues we're looking to overcome, and why we depend on website and social media, is not everybody wants to be contacted. And you have to, within our preference center, how do we get a hold of you? You have to go through that process for that to be successful. We're doing better with that. Each contact we have with customers, we try to obtain that information. But I think all agencies and our company struggle with that. I know when we talk to Red Cross and others, even the sheriff's department and whatnot, they struggle with how do we contact people specific to an area. But thank you.
Just 1 second. You said something there, and I think that's right at the very end on sometimes people don't want to be contacted, and there is that. But I mean, at some point, I would also argue that it's incumbent on people to educate themselves where they can go to get registered. And I believe you've done a reasonable job of trying to educate the people, but at some point in order for me to get a text in, case of an emergency, at some point I've got to be able to go somewhere, or I've got to do my part to get to that, to where I can give you my information so we can have that communication. Because, I mean, you can't just, it doesn't seem effective to just do a umbrella robocall across Montana if the risk is in Helmville and there, you know, I mean, there's got to be a way to narrow that down to where you can have effective communication too. And I believe part of that responsibility does lie on the people that want to be contacted. So, but thanks for that, Commissioner Pinocci.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I get my bill from Northwest Energy, and it might be a neat idea if you explain that you're trying to keep in touch with customers on letting them know when an outage is going to be. And you could say, hey, look, if you write down on the bill in this area your cell phone and you allow us to send you a text, give us permission to send you a text with an update if we're going to have a planned outage, I would bet a lot of people would say yes to that and provide you a number. Then you guys could enter that. This does a couple of neat things. We're able to say at the commission, if someone calls to complain, well, on your bill, Northwest Energy's had an area where if you give them a cell phone, they'll keep you updated. So if you fill that out, they did a really good outreach there to allow you to get that update. Also, I think this is pretty affordable. Once you enter that data, when you send that text out to everybody, you know, that's pretty quick and affordable. Also, if somebody complains that you're not keeping in touch with them, you can point to the bill and say it's right here in the bill where you could put your cell phone down. Now, let's say not everybody has a cell phone or they don't do text. You could say we could also email you an update. Give us your email and permission to keep you updated. And we could do both, an email and a text. I think this is a no-lose situation if you're able to put that in a bill here in a timely fashion, say in the next couple months. I don't see any negativeness to that. I think it only would be positive. So that's a suggestion there. Okay, so I want to talk about this performance metric maturity. That's impressive. You're ahead of schedule compared to other states. Is that correct?
I believe it is. Not other states. Where we're at with where other utilities would be on their journey and timeline. We're ahead of other utilities.
That include cooperatives, I think?
It would.
Okay. Well, it's impressive to see. Now, a question I have is, we're a high fire risk state more than other states. So I'd want you to be a leader because we have a higher responsibility because we're this high fire risk state. They tell me 1 or 2 in the United States. Does that sound correct?
It is correct. Yes, we're a high risk state.
Is there money available from the federal government? If you were able to say, you could go to Washington and say, being we're one of the top 2 or 3 states in the country, is there money available to help us catch up? Because we've really got to get ahead of this problem after what happened in California. Is there any money available for that?
From a utility perspective?
Yeah, federal money for a utility that has a responsibility to do what we're trying to achieve here because we're a high fire risk area, more so than other states.
There was some funding available under the it was
What was the
IJA programs,
infrastructure and jobs?
infrastructure and jobs program. You had to apply for those. We went through the application of it. Our need didn't compete with other needs across the nation. So we did actually engage into the processes to receive the funding that was available by the federal government. I will tell you it was fairly limited. And we weren't successful in receiving those funding. So we have gone down that route. I will tell you, we've worked with the state DEQ. They actually have some federal level of funding. We do have a a few projects that actually could be funded through the state DEQ's funding mechanism through the Department of Energy.
Do you think the Public Service Commission could help with that argument if this office sent something to Washington to say, look, Montana's a high fire risk area compared to other states. We have some parks like Yellowstone or Glacier Park. And if they were to catch fire, which Yellowstone has before, it would really be a tragedy. Do you think that would help encourage to get that funding to you if this office helped? Is there a teamwork we could do together there?
Commissioner, I'm never going to say no to the avenues of potential funding. So, I mean, if you have a willingness to do that, I'm not sure what avenues are available to do that. I'm not sure what funding is declared. Is that something we could do through our legislators? I don't know that, but certainly I'm not going to say no to that. I'd be a fool to say no to asking for any help to help our customers fund this issue.
Troy Downing wanted to see me, but not too long ago, and he was in town on a Saturday. I had to come drive here 100 miles and then open up the office, and he met with me and said, hey, what could I do? I didn't think of that, but boy, I'm thinking that now. So I might call him and let him know.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, so and I sure encourage you to do the same thing if you see Troy Downing or any of our elected officials that go to Washington. So I see that we have these 1,200 shutoffs, and about 450 of them are electronic closures. And that's pretty exciting because I get the feeling that you can just tap a keyboard and turn off a circuit, and that makes that line void of power in a high wind condition area. And when you go to put these in, are you putting them in because that device needs replaced? What I'd like to think is you're putting these devices in the highest fire risk areas first. Is that happening, or are you just replacing them because they need to be replaced? Then you'll do the electronic shutoff replacement. Tell me a little bit about that.
Both.
Right.
We're replacing them. We're replacing them with electronic to be able to give us the ability to operate them from a control center. And absolutely, we are most focused with our high risk areas, the ones that we would expect to go on and off the most within a season is where we've begun our prioritization of that. For example, we have some that are a hydraulic device versus an electronic device that actually exist in town. We can get to those. We have people in town. We have people here in Helena. They're not on our prioritized list. Eventually, I'd like to see them all replaced because, again, it's the art of operating your system risk-based or reliability-based. That device helps you on both ends of the spectrum. But for the purposes of our focus is on expanding our ability to mitigate risk-based operations, we will start with the prioritized areas first.
Well, I think that's great. Good to hear. Let's talk a little bit about insurance, which is a big problem in California because rates have went up, and they're asking the ratepayer actually across the country, I think, to help pay for what happened in California. Northwest Energy is self-insured, and you're not relying on an insurance company you reach out to get coverage. Is that correct?
We have a tower of insurance companies, and beyond a deductible amount, then we're into those towers. So what we're doing from an insurance standpoint is the issue around this issue is certainly we want to do what we can to keep things affordable. But more importantly, I think our primary interest was to be able to stay insured.
Exactly.
With those mutual, that was where we were at certainly several years ago when I talked about the the questions with insurance companies and why it was important that we develop a plan is so that we could stay insurable, because there's risk to customers if we don't. So
Insurance rates since California in the past 4 or 5 years, have they doubled for Northwest Energy? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I can't, not in any detail. I can tell you that doubling is you're in the ballpark when you talk about our insurance rates have doubled for the purposes of wildfire. Now, what some insurance companies have done is they've broke things out to this is what's going to cost you for wildfire, this is what's going to cost you for all other things. So just to apply a doubling may not be accurate, but for the purpose of the threat of wildfire, it's in the realm of double.
This performance metric maturity chart, I would like to get that in front of the insurance company to say, look, we would like a little better insurance rate because we're demonstrating we're ahead of schedule. Does that work? And have you guys reached out? Because the reason I should bring this question out is I'm trying to watch out for the cost to the ratepayer. Insurance costs fall to the ratepayer. Or is the insurance company looking at this in a positive manner, saying, hey, we're glad you're doing this and, you know, we can have a little better insurance rate? Or perhaps they don't care and they're just raising the rates on you. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I don't know if they care or not. That one's a tough for me to answer, but I will tell you again, they certainly are looking to see these kind of metrics. I mean, you guys were motivated for these. We've been motivated for these. Insurance companies, everybody wants an indicator to be able to understand how you're doing, so that they can incorporate that into their interest and their interest into the subject. The insurance companies, if you're asking me if they're looking at these because they want to understand these because they're on the cusp of reducing rates, I don't know that we're there yet. What they're evaluating us for is to understand insurability. And I think we're still in that realm. Now, should they come down, that's Commissioner, that's a subject I probably share with you, but getting them to come down might be a different thing.
I'm under a little pressure because the ratepayer keeps complaining to me that our rates are going up, and they want to know what I'm doing to help prevent that. So I'm trying to be on the ball here. So I was reaching out to Jim Brown's office, state auditor, saying, look, if our utilities in Montana are going to demonstrate that they're in the lead according to this performance metric maturity chart, I was asking Jim, you know, what could you do to work with insurance companies to see if I'm getting a break because we're making that investment, right? I think Molnar's concern is if he can see a track record where maybe we're seeing some improvements, we can make that argument. But I'm trying to be on the ball here to answer tough questions from the ratepayer. I look at utility performance kind of like automobile industry. You know, 100 years ago, we didn't have seat belts or blinkers. And then we came out with seat belts and blinkers and airbags. We're never going to stop traffic fatalities, just like we're never going to stop a fire started by a power company, but we can reduce it greatly. And certainly if I call my insurance company, if I've got a newer car with side radar and airbags and the ability to notify the authorities if there was an airbag deployment, I get an insurance break over a car that doesn't have that. So I think the insurance industry has to do that for my utilities as well. I'm practicing here with you, but I think you should be rewarded if you're making these changes. And I want to ask about that when I can. Do you think that we turn to maybe Jim Brown's office or maybe our U.S. congressman to make sure that we're getting some benefits there? What are your thoughts? Are you guys thinking about that at Northwest Energy?
Well, we have a whole group that works with managing, again, our insurability. They also are very active in understanding what can we do in engaging directly with the insurance companies. As far as other pressure that we could put to the insurance companies to change what has been done to maybe reverse some of that trend. I don't know that we've been active in that. I appreciate your position in it, and I also appreciate your interest, and I appreciate the recognition that you see that we're doing a fine job with mitigating the wildfire to the extent that we can. So thank you, Commissioner.
One last question. The Forest Service is a little finicky about having their trees in a wide pathway because they don't like the look of it. However, if a tree is able to hit the line and burn the whole forest down, then I think the pathway would have been better if it's wider. And there's a difference, I think, between federal forest regulation on your ability to get those trees away from the line compared to state. Has that been cleared up? Are you able to get that pathway wider? My vision is this: if a tree can fall over and hit the line, it needs to be cut down. Has that improved any? Is that still a problem?
What I'm going to say is that our relationship with the Forest Service, BLM, state agencies, federal agencies around this issue has greatly changed and greatly improved over the past decade. And it feels like cooperatively, if we need to get something done, cooperatively, we find a way to do that.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dew. Just a couple, probably a little more simple in nature, but you had mentioned something about, collaboration with state agencies and federal agencies, which is good. But are you doing anything? You've got shared interest with Bonneville Power. You've got shared interest with, your transmission system with electric co-ops. Are you maybe gleaning some information from them, seeing what is working in areas or things that you've learned, sharing that with them? Is there like a cross-pollination with information so you're not all reinventing the wheel as you move forward in a system that works better for all of you in the long run?
Yeah, thank you, President. The answer to that is yes. I will say that Bonneville is a bit of a different animal than our utility. We're very aligned from a transmission perspective. And that's where our partnership sits. So in those narrow range of assets, I do think we are aligned. I think even from a PSPS perspective, when Bonneville says they're going to do a PSPS, that's at the transmission level, and there's only a couple of customers, and we're one of them, right? So that's a whole different process and approach for Bonneville than it is for us. No, the co-ops, I think, absolutely, we're very aligned, and in fact, sometimes we're the co-op's Bonneville, if you will. We can shut something off, and one thing that I think we've had to improve on from our perspective is understanding the impact of, that's not just one customer. That co-op customer could be 500 or 1,000 or whatever we could be impacting. And so that when we look at prioritization from that reliability to that risk-based spectrum I keep mentioning, that we're actually giving true credence to the full understanding of the impact of our actions. I will also say that throughout the year we've had really good coordination with the co-ops, both at the association level, cooperation. We've invited them to summits that we've been part of. In fact, have had great attendance from the co-ops for the purposes of learning from each other. And let's not all reinvent our own wheel. How about we start with your wheel and let's tweak it a little bit to better fit our needs. So there's been a lot of that within the state. I applaud Nate and his team. They interact with them often, and then of course within our operations, in all of our operating areas, our operational leaders have established those relationships as well. So thank you, President.
Yeah, thank you. I think I had a couple other questions, but it seemed like you touched on those while you were drilling down for some of the other commissioners. So you don't have any. Thanks, Commissioner Bukasek. Thank you all for your time today and for the update and the education, as always. Worth it. So we appreciate you being here.
Thank you for being part of our evolution, and it continues. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks, everyone. The time is 11:34 a.m.